There's no question that the late 90s was an absolute rollercoaster ride when it came to first-person shooters. This was a time the genre was entering its full 3D graphics stage. It's also the time that LAN parties and multiplayer were becoming bigger and bigger in popularity. Whether they took place in someone's basement or dimly lit net cafes, LAN parties were the place to be to throw down with your friends in all sort of games. Out of all these titles though, none were as brutally fast-paced and competitive as Quake 2 and Unreal. Both games were equally popular back in the day despite being released almost a year apart. Both also helped lay the foundations for what is now a thriving first-person shooter esports landscape. And while comparing these two is like walking in a room full of frogs, we're willing to take the plunge. So let's put together and compare these two first-person shooter juggernauts in a battle to the death. Most shooters aren't typically known for their intricate stories and mind-bending narratives. That tradition started from a long time ago, as it rings true in Quake 2's and Unreal's cases as well. We'd be remiss, however, if we didn't include their stories in this comparison. As we'd expect from both, they're very similar story settings. Battle-hardened person finds himself stranded and alone to fight against hordes of enemies in order to achieve a higher goal. The devil's in the details though. Quake 2 takes a similar route to Doom and places you in the boots of a space soldier type protagonist called Bitterman. Out of sheer luck, his landing pod gets knocked away from its drop zone, leaving him alone to face off against the not so friendly Strog civilization and attempt to assassinate the leader, Macron. Unreal, on the other hand, makes a bit more of an attempt to steer its narrative away from the familiar tropes. It places you in the role of an unnamed prisoner who crash lands on the planet Napali. Its peaceful denizens, the tribal Nali, are enslaved by the ruthless reptilians Karj. Your task is to keep your skin intact and free the enslaved Nali in the process. One could argue that both games could have put a lot more thought into the stories, but we'll give this one to Unreal, which took a slightly less stroby direction. As we've said, we play first-person shooters for the adrenaline-pumping gameplay, and both Quake 2 and Unreal have it in spades. Both games have awesome weapons to skewer, zap, blast, and annihilate enemies with. Either title also have fast movement and big emphasis on maintaining mobility in order to stay alive. While you get your money's worth in terms of how satisfying the blowing up of alien scum is in both games, ultimately Quake 2 is the better game. Its guns are all incredibly punchy and can down enemies at nearly the blink of an eye. Unreal, on the other hand, has a higher time to kill, which can make it seem comparatively sluggish. Quake 2 also beats its rival into submission in terms of level design, thanks to some clever fox puzzles and some interesting verticality. Unreal's AI was also not its strong suit, as enemies tended to feel floaty and mindless with very little variety in their approach and movement. While Quake 2's NPC enemies weren't that much cleverer, they did have a tendency to jump, strafe and duck, often making them harder targets to pin down. The final round in the showdown is the multiplayer arena, where both games shine quite bright. Only one ever gets to walk out victorious, and that is Quake 2. While both games have similar mode offerings like Capture the Flag and Deathmatch, Quake 2 edges Unreal out thanks to its sheer level design. Unreal's multiplayer levels can feel linear, with fewer options for flanking and other tactics. Quake 2's level design, on the other hand, is a bit more inventive and requires more map knowledge in order to become the dominant player. And there you have it. Quake 2 ultimately is the better game when compared to Unreal, but that isn't to say that Unreal is not a game worth exploring, as it was one of the first titles to make use of the now universally used Unreal Engine. Quake 2, however, we remember more fondly because of its awesome weapons and intuitive level design. But enough about us. What do you think of these two titles? Which of these two were your favorites back in the day? Sign up in the comments below. Don't forget to like if you did find this video interesting. Consider subscribing for future uploads. Thanks again for all the support. Till next time, see ya.